Good morning, students. Once again, welcome back to the course of Concurrent and Parallel Programming. This video is brought to you by Newton's Group of Institutions, Macherla. This is Arvind Egireddy from the Department of Computer Science and Engineering. Today in this lecture, let us discuss about vector processors and processor arrays. There are two essential different models of parallel computers. One is vector computers and the other one is multiprocessors. A vector computer, which is simply a computer that has an instructions and that can operate on a vector. A pipelined vector processor, which is an vector processor, which can issue a vector instructions that is going to operate on all the elements of the vector in parallel. And this is by sending those elements through a highly pipelined functional unit with a fast clock. So here a processor array, which is an vector processor, and this achieves parallelism by having a collection of identical synchronized processing elements PEs, and each of which they execute the same instructions on different data and which are being controlled by a single control unit. Because here all the PEs, they execute the same instruction at the same time. This type of architecture which is suited for problems with data parallelism. Whereas processor arrays, which are often used in scientific applications because these often they contain high amount of data parallelism. So now let us see the processor array architecture. So in a processor array, each process element has an unique identifier. It's a processor ID, and which can be used during the computation. So here each PE which has a small local memory in which its own private data can be stored. So here the data on which each PE operates is being distributed among the PE's local memories at the start of computation provides it's in the main memory. So here the control unit which might be full-edged CPU broadcast the instructions to the executed which can be executed to the PEs and which executes on data from its local memory, and they can store the results in their local memories and they can return the global results back onto the CPU. Here the global result line, which is usually a separate parallel bus that allows each process element to transmit the values back to the CPU to be combined by a parallel global operation such as a logical AND or a logical OR, depending on the hardware support in that particular CPU. So here this particular figure which contains a semantic diagram of a typical processor array. So these PEs, they are connected to each other through an interconnection network that allows them to execute the data with each other. So here if the process array has suppose n PEs, then the time it takes to perform the same operation on n elements is same as to perform it on one single element. So if the number of data items to be manipulated is larger than n, then it usually the programmer's job to arrange for the additional elements to be stored in the PE's local memory and to get operated on the appropriate sequence. So here, for example, if the machine is having 1024 PEs and an array of size 500 must be processed, then since 5000 is equal to 4 times 1024 plus 4, here the 5000 elements will be distributed among all the PEs by given 4 elements to 1024 PEs and 5 to 4 PEs. So here the topology of interconnection networks that is going to determine how easy it is to perform different types of computations. And if the interconnection network, which is an butterfly network, Then for example, the message between the PEs will travel many links in each communication, which slowing down the computations greatly. So if the machine is being designed for faster manipulations of two-dimensional data sets, in such cases, as images are matrices, then the interconnection network, which should be an 2V mesh, arranged as a direct topology. Now, let us see the processor array performance. So here, although the subject of parallel algorithm performance will be covered in depth in our later videos, in our later lectures, let us introduce a measure of computing performance here. Namely, the number of operations per second that the computer is going to execute or the computer can execute. Of course, there are many other metrics by which the computer performance can be evaluated. So this is one common thing what we approach what we are going to use. So here, if the processor which has 100 processing elements and each is kept busy all of the time and executes H operations per second, then the processor array executes 100 H operations per second. If at any moment of time, on average, only a fraction F of the PEs are active, then the performance is reduced to 100 FH operations per second. So here, the average fraction of PEs that are actively executed are actively executing the instructions at any time, which is called the utilization of the processor array. And here, several factors, they influence this particular utilization. So whether or not the number of data elements to be processed, which is a multiple of number of PEs, and if it is not, then at some point where will be the some PEs, they will be in idle, and while others are active. So for that, let us see one example. So here, the performance of the processor array on this particular problem, that is for suppose a processor array has 512 PEs, two arrays A and B of 500 floating point numbers, each is to be added and stored into a third array C. Then the PEs can execute a floating point addition, including fetching and storing in 100 nanoseconds. Then the performance of this processor array on this particular problem would be here 512 operations by 100 nanoseconds, where 1 nano is equal to 10 to the power of, so 1 nanosecond is equal to 10 to the power of minus 9 seconds. So it will be 512 operations by 100 into 10 to the power of minus 9 seconds. So which by simplification, we will be getting 5.12 into 10 to the power of 9 flops. So what is the term flop? So flop in short form is nothing but it is a floating point operation per second. Suppose if the size of an array is 7,000 instead. So here in this case, the first 512 elements will be executed in parallel by the PEs, taking 100 nanoseconds in total, but the remaining 188 elements, which will require 188 PEs to be active, and another 100 nanoseconds will elapse. So here, therefore, the performance for this particular thing will be 700 operations by 200 nanoseconds. So here, 700 by 200 nanoseconds, which is 700 operations by 200 into 10 to the power of minus 9 seconds, because 1 nano is equal to 10 to the power of 9. So which by evaluating, we will be getting the value 3.5 into 10 to the power of 9 flops. So here you can clearly see that there is less than 70% of the peak performance. So here the processor array performance can be calculated in this particular form. So now let us see what is a processor masking. So here a processor array which also can handle what P's do when they do not need to participate in a computation, as in the example what we have discussed earlier. So this problem is going to arise when conditional instructions such as if then else instructions that will get executed. So in this case, it is possible that the true branch will be needed to be taken in some P's, and the false branch is going to get executed in other P's. So here the problem is that the control unit is going to issue single instruction to all the P's, and there is no mode in which some P's they get executed on the instructions and others, or a different one. So therefore, a way to process these arrays has to work is that when the true branch is executed and the P's that are not supposed to execute that particular instructions must be deactivated. And when the false branch is getting executed, the ones that are not supposed to execute the instructions must be deactivated. So here the deactivation. So here the deactivation which is being achieved by using the given P is mask bit. So which we can say that they can set and they can be unset. So when the condition is being tested by the P, if it must be deactivated in the next instruction, then it sets its mask bit to prevent it from executing. So after the instruction sequence for the true branch is complete, then the control unit issues an instruction to each piece to invert its mask bit. So here the one that was masked out or need to be unmasked, and the one that has been active becomes inactive because their mask bits have been set. So here the false branch instructions, they are executed, and the control unit is going to send an instruction to all the P's to clear their mask bit. So it should be apparent that when a program contains a large fraction of control executed code, then the fraction of idle P's they are going to increase, and the performance therefore gets decreased. So now let us see what is multiprocessors. So in keeping with the Quinn's usage, we will use the term multiprocessor to mean a computer with multiple CPUs and a shared memory. So that is what many others they going to call as a shared memory multiprocessor. So here in a multiprocessor, the same address that is being generated on two different CPUs, they refer to the same memory location. And here the multiprocessors, they are being divided into two types: those in which the shared memory is being physically in one place, and the one in which it is being distributed among the processors. So now let us see what is the centralized shared memory multiprocessors. So in multiprocessors, let us discuss about centralized shared multiprocessor. So in a centralized memory multiprocessor, all the processors, they are going to have equal access to the physical memory. And this type of multiprocessor, which is called as an uniform memory access multiprocessor or UMA multiprocessor. So here the UMA multiprocessors, they may also be called as symmetric multiprocessors or SMP. So here the UMA multiprocessors, which are relatively easy to build because additional processors can be added to the bus of a conventional uniprocessor mechanism. because here the modern caches greatly reduce the need of the primary memory access. And the increase in the bus traffic does not become a major performance issue until the number of CPUs is more than few dozens or so. And because there is a shared physical memory, these independent processors that are running on the separate CPUs, they can also share the data. So it becomes the programmer's responsibility to ensure that the data that is being accessed without the race conditions, and usually the hardware in this particular type of machines, they are going to provide various instructions to make this easier for the programmer, such as barrier synchronization primitives or semaphores operations. So here, what is barrier synchronization instruction? A barrier synchronization instruction, which is an instruction that when it is executed by a process, causes the process to wait until all the other cooperating process, they have reached the same instructions in that particular code. And this will be described in more detail in our later discussions, in our later videos. So here, semaphores and semaphores operations, which are also a means to allow the process to cooperate in how they access the region of their code and how they access a shared data item. But these two, of course, they require that the programmers, they use them correctly. So here, the processors, they can also have their own private data, and which is the data that is being used only by a single processor. So here in this particular picture, which depicts a UMA multiprocessor with 4 CPUs. So here the hardware designer must address the cache coherence problem. And if the shared memory multiprocessor with separate caches in each processor, so the problem is that the separate caches, they can have copies of the same memory blocks. And unless measured, some certain types of measures need to be taken to prevent them. So the copies will end up having different values for the blocks. And this is going to, or this will happen whenever two different processors, they try to modify their copies with the different values, and nothing is being done to propagate the changes on other caches. So here, usually a snooping cache protocol, which is being used in these types of machines. Of course, that is a big topic which we cannot discuss here. Let us discuss in our next videos. Then coming to the distributed shared memory multiprocessors. So in a centralized memory multiprocessors, the shared access to a common memory through a bus, which is going to limit how many CPUs can be accommodated. And here another alternative is to attach separate memory modules for each processor. So when all the processors, they can access the memory modules that are being attached to all other processors, then it is called as a distributed multiprocessor or a non-uniform memory access multiprocessor, that is NUMA multiprocessors. Because it is much faster to access the local memory that is being attached directly to the processor than the modules attached to other processors. So here in this particular case, the access is not uniform. Hence is that this particular name which is been given. So here executing these kinds of programs, they tend to obey the principles of spatial locality and temporal locality. So what is spatial locality? So here spatial locality, which means that the memory locations that they are going to access, they tend to be near to each other in a small window of time. And temporal locality, which means that the memory locations that are accessed once tend to be accessed frequently in a small window of time. And this behavior can be used to advantage so that most of the processors references to the memory are in not private memory. So here when shared memory is being distributed in this particular way, the cache coherence problems, they cannot be solved with snooping protocols, because snooping becomes inefficient for large number of processors. So here on these machines, a directory based protocol is used. So we will not describe that protocols, of course, here. So please, the interested video tubers, they can watch my later videos wherein I will present in detail about these things. Now let us see what is a multi-computer. So a multi-computer, which is a distributed memory, multiple CPU computers, but of course the memory is been not shared, and each CPU which is going to have its own address space, and that can be accessed only in the local memory, and which is called which we call it as an private memory. So here the same address of two different CPUs, they are going to refer to two different memory locations. So here these machines which we call as private memory multiprocessors, because there is no shared address space, and the only way of processors running on these different CPUs to communicate is through some type of message passing system. And the architecture of this type of multiprocessor or multi-computers, they typically support efficient message passing technique. So here a commercial multi-computer, which is a multi-computer designed and which is being manufactured and which is being intended to sold as an multi-computer. So the commodity, this particular commodity of cluster, which is called as a multi-computer, which is going to put together out of other shelf components to be created in a multi-computer. So here a commercial multi-computers interconnection network and the processors which are being optimized to work with each other, providing low latency, high bandwidth connections between the computers at a higher price tag and higher commodity clusters. So here commodity clusters through generally have lower performance with a higher latency and low bandwidth in the inter-process connections. So now let us see one more important topic. What is asymmetric multi-computers? So here some multi-computers, they are being designed with a special front-end computers and back-end computers. So here the idea being that the front-end servers as which is going to serve as a master and gateway for that particular machine, and the back-end of the CPU are for computational purpose. So these are the types of machines which are called as an asymmetric multi-computers. Here users log into the front end and their job are run on the back end process, and here all the IO tasks takes place through the front end machine. So here the software that runs on these front end and back ends is also, of course, it is different. So here the front end which is going to have more powerful and versatile operating systems and compilers, and whereas the backend process, they have scaled down operating systems that require less memory and resource, what we can see in this particular picture here on the slide. So here the problem with this kind of design is that the front end is a bottleneck, and it does not scale well because of the front end, as the performance of the front-end host, which is going to limit the number of users and the number of jobs. So here the pared down operating systems on the back end, they do not allow for sophisticated debugging tools. So here the parallel programs, they must be written in two parts. The parts that run on the front end and interacts with the IO devices and the user, and the part that runs on the back end. So these last two problems were such an impediment. That is, they may asymmetrical multi-process that include advanced debugging facilities and IO support on the backend host. So now let us see what is symmetric multi-computers. A symmetric multi-computer is one in which all of the hosts are identical and are being connected to each other through an interconnection network. So users can log into any host and any LE system, and IO devices are equally accessible for every host. And this overcomes the bottleneck of the front-end host as well as the scalability issues. But of course, it has many more other problems. Of course, because it is not really a suitable environment for running large-scale parallel programs, because there is a little control over how many jobs are being running on any one host. And all hosts, they are being designed to allow the program development and general interactive use, which degrades the performance of highly computed bound job. So that you can see clearly in this particular picture. Now coming to the Flenny's taxonomy. So in 1996, Michael Flenny, he proposed a categorization of parallel hardware based upon the classification schema with the two orthogonal parameters, the instruction stream and the data stream. So here in this particular taxonomy, a mechanism was being classified by whether it has a single or multiple instruction streams, or whether it has a single or multiple data streams. So here an instruction stream, which is a sequence of instructions that run through the processor, and the data stream is a sequence of data items that are being computed by a processor. So here, for example, the ordinary single computer, which has a single instruction stream and a single data stream, and this schema, which is going to lead to the 4 independent types of computers. Firstly, SISD, single instruction, single data, SISD, single instruction, single data. That is a conventional uniprocessor. SIMD, single instruction, multiple data, like MMX or SSC instructions in the x86 processor series, or processor arrays and pipelined vector processors. Coming to SIMD multiprocessors, which issue a single instruction that operates on multiple data items simultaneously. So here vector processors are SIMD multiprocessors, which means that these processors, they arrays are pipelined vector processors, which are also SIMD machines. And third one, MISD, multiple instruction single data, which is very rare, but one example is the US space shuttling controller. So here the systolic arrays fall into this particular category as well. And fourth one is MIMD, multiple instruction, multiple data, SMPS clusters. So this is the most common multiprocessor MIMD multiprocessor. So here MIMD multiprocessors are more complex and expensive, and so the number of processors, they tend to be smaller than SIMD machines. So here today's multiprocessors are found on desktop with anywhere from 2 to 16 processors. So here multi-process and multi-computers, they fall into this particular category. So that's all for now. I hope you are satisfied with my lecture. So thank you for paying your attention till the end. If you like this video, please subscribe to my channel for more videos. Thank you. Thank you, Anand.